Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. Well, happy Thursday. Happy Wednesday. How y'all doing? Welcome to the Octavia Butler Mixtape course. If you can hear me, let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Make sure I'm clear. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside. I am so excited to have you in the class for our first session. How y'all doing? If you registered as a guest, I want y'all to come on up because we're having a discussion, right? So if you would like to come up and join the class, I think I know how to do it, right? I want you all to pop on up here. Because this class is a discussion based course, right? I'm not a lecturer. I will fill in the gaps for you as you need it, but I'm not a lecturer, y'all. I think that sometimes in academia, we tell you what to think as opposed to encouraging you to think, right? And since I am sure that you all are thinking people, I want to have you discuss the text with me. Okay, wait, I think I bam, accept. So I need at least 10 people up here. And you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to, but I need at least 10 people. Michaela, I need at least 10 people to come on up here. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. 10 folks. Y'all were sounding off in the discussion board. Don't be shy. I'm sorry. I invited someone who may not want to come up. I'm sorry. If you want to come up, y'all know what to do. But let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can see me. Today we are discussing Octavia Butler's Kindred. So welcome to week 1 of English 495, the Octavia Butler Mixtape. Hey y'all, hey. I need more people to come on up here though to make sure we have a fruitful discussion. So I would like some volunteers to share your insight and thoughts because that's super important. Where's my other notepad? As y'all come in, can y'all like this live too? If you cannot stay the entire time, that's totally fine with me. I will actually be uploading this live to YouTube. And so please make sure you are subscribed to the Octavia Butler Mixtape. Hold on, y'all. The Octavia Butler Mixtape YouTube page. I'm trying to get everybody up here who's requesting. Okay. Did I get everybody? Okay, wait, one more. I think I got everybody. Okay. Okay, so as you come on, make sure, as you're a guest, make sure you're muted. Okay? I have some announcements that I want to make real quick before we hop on, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Let me make sure I got everybody who want to come up. I think I need some more people. It's 121 of us here. Even if you come up to share your organic thoughts, this is a public class, okay? So no answer is a wrong answer. I am happy to listen to you. And also if you wanted to chat with a Butler Scholar, this is your moment. Okay, so few quick things. Make sure you're subscribed to the Substack. The link is in my bio. This is where I'm sharing all of the Butler insight. This is where I am sharing the discussion board questions and posts. This is where we are dialoguing with each other before we come to class on Wednesdays, right? So if you want to tap in with us over there, oh man, it's telling me I reached my max number. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, y'all. So if anyone ever wants to drop down after you said your 2 cents and give someone else a chance to jump up here and discuss with us, feel free, or you can engage in the chat and I will be sure to split my attention between the panelists as well as the people in the chat. All right, so listen, subscribe to the Substack and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're unable to ever make a class, the replay will be available by the next day on the Octavia Butler Mixtape YouTube page. That link is also in my bio. All right. So before we get started, I wanted to read you all some of Butler's thoughts about Kindred. I know y'all got a lot to say. Y'all have been turning Kevin every which way but loose. You all have told me your organic feelings in the chat last night. I get it. I know we have a lot to say, but I want to read you some of Butler's thoughts about Kindred. And I'm going to read from this book. You can screenshot it if you want to ever read some of her interviews. It's called Conversations with Octavia Butler, and it is edited by Consuela Francis. So just in case you want to grab your copy from wherever books are sold. All right. So in this interview, Butler is being interviewed by Larry McCaffrey and Jim Meninin, and this is 1988. So you know that Kindred was published in 1979. And one of the interviewers asks, Kindred seems like a very conscious break from what you are doing in the Patternist series. Okay, so if you don't know, Butler's Kindred serves as an interruption to the Patternist series, and we will start reading the Patternist series right after we're done with this book. So the way that Butler was writing, she wrote Pattern Master 1976, Mind of My Mind 1977, Survivor, Pattern Master 1976. 1977 was actually, 1977 was Mind of My Mind. 1978 was Survivor. 1979 was Kindred. 1980 was Wild Seed. So this book, and then 1984 was Clay's Ark. So this book comes right before Wild Seed, which is the next book we're going to read. And so it served as an interruption to the Patternist series, but I found it fascinating what Butler had to say about it, because I've argued with scholars. About this, and they've told me, no, Brianna, you're wrong. And I'm like, if Butler said it, I can't be wrong. Okay. So the interviewer is interviewing her and saying in this question, it seems like a very conscious break from what you're doing with the Patternist series. And he was referring to Kindred. And here's what Butler says. She says, actually, Kindred was supposed to be part of the series, but it didn't seem to fit, probably because I wanted to be more realistic than I had been in the earlier books. In fact, Kindred grew out of something I heard when I was in college during the mid-1960s. I was a member of a Black student union, along with this guy who had been interested in Black history before it became fashionable. He was considered quite knowledgeable, but his attitude about slavery was very much like the attitude I had held when I was 13. That is, he felt that the older generation should have rebelled. He commented, I wish I could kill off all of these people, all of the old people who had been holding us back for so long, but I can't because I'd have to start with my own parents. This man knew a great deal more than I did about Black history, but he didn't feel it in his gut. In Kindred, I wanted to take somebody with this guy's upbringing. He was pretty much middle Black class, and put him in the antebellum South to see how well he stood up. But I couldn't sustain the character. Everything about him was wrong. His body language, the way he looked at white people, even the fact that he looked at them at all. I realized unless I wanted to turn Kindred into a wish fulfillment fantasy, I simply couldn't make the main character who was dangerous, but who wasn't perceived as being so dangerous that she could have been killed. So I wanted to read that, right? Because I know that we have a problem. A lot of people give Dana a hard time. A lot of people are frustrated with her. And I just wanted to let you know that Butler did want to make this character male. She did. But she could not sustain him, right? As she said, she could not sustain the character as she was writing him. Therefore, she made the character a woman, a dangerous woman. But she couldn't be so dangerous that she was perceived as dangerous, okay? So I think that's important to know as we are navigating through Kindred, that this character is important. Dana is not necessarily a victim, but Butler sees her as a dangerous person. Okay, panelists. Take your phones off mute. Let me know what you all think. Let me know your name and let me know what you think. I want to hear organic thoughts about Kindred. And just for the record, because I know a lot of people finished the book, y'all, do not tell the whole book. Okay? Do not tell what happened in the end. You were supposed to stop when Dana was trying to, when Dana threw the map in the fireplace and Rufus did not want her to keep the abolitionist garbage. Okay. All right, panelists, tell me what y'all think. What y'all think about Kindred?
I guess I'll go since
Okay. What's your name?
my name is Makayla.
Hey, Makayla. Okay, what you got?
This was like a very emotional roller coaster.
Mhm.
This was my first Octavia Butler read out of everything. So, like, I didn't even know what Kindred was about. I literally went in blind. It was like, I've always wanted to read, but I didn't necessarily want to do it alone.
Okay,
Um,
Makayla, you sound a little far. Can you come a little closer?
can you hear me now?
Still a little far, but maybe it's me. Go ahead.
Okay. Hold on. It may just be my, uh, I'll let somebody else go while I try to get my audio together.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in and tell me what y'all think? No spoilers.
My name is Tachi.
Hey, Tachi.
Hey, this is my first time reading any Butler work,
Okay.
but I did see Kindred, or what was supposed to be the series on Hulu. I did. Very different. But anyway, I did.
Okay.
And okay, my thoughts are in the beginning, I was a little frustrated at my frustrations with Dana. Okay. So number one, she was fully aware of like slavery, the history there and everything like that. And the particular scene that I'm referencing is her teaching Nigel to read.
Okay.
I knew that we had really courageous ancestors back then who did do this, but I felt like how she went about it was very, very careless because she was bringing her, I don't know, present self into this antebellum South. And she was very careless with that. And it could have harmed a lot more people. I don't know. She just kept misstepping. But then I'm like, why are you frustrated? Would you do any better in this situation? So I was frustrated at my frustration with her because it just seems like she was being callous, and then I was just like, but girl, would you do any better?
Yeah.
So yeah. I feel like she was, again, we were talking about in the discussion board how astute she is and educated she is and how much she educated herself now that she knew that she would be traveling back and forth, but sometimes it really didn't help her. It helped her some, and for other, situations such as this, it didn't really
Yeah.
help her much. So that we're gonna talk about Kevin all day, so I'm gonna skip that. And then I don't know. A part of me just didn't like how soft Dana is with Rufus and making excuses with him, and Butler just painting them in a light to be like, oh, they too are victims of their society. I didn't like that.
Okay.
It's just that was a little frustrating. I see what she's trying to say, and I guess in the broader sense of everything, I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like with Dana, she was flying a little too close to the sun with Rufus, and every time I don't know, he was just letting us down. And it's just, we know this. She knows this. Why
Yeah.
do we keep, giving him chance and excuse and all of these things? So those were my initial thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so one thing that I want everyone to consider, right? Because we are in this 21st century and we have our lens on from the 2000s and beyond, right? But one thing that we have to consider are the limitations of education. Right. And so a lot of people are educated and we rely on education. But I think what Butler was showing us is that your education will fail you because you do not know how to survive. And if anyone has ever read Parable of the Sower, I feel like people would know when she's contemplating these California fires that she's showing, even in this text, that people who live in walled communities cannot survive in society without certain luxuries that they have become dependent upon. And so even though Dana is this educated woman, rightfully so, and she is this author, when she goes back to the South, that fails her. It does not mean anything in education. We will see over and over again, no matter how much she knows about enslavement, it's really different when you're living it, right? And so I think Butler was kind of jerking every reader around with that. Like, Dana, why don't you know? Why don't you know? But then again, you have to ask yourself, what you know. Given all of the movies you've seen, 12 Years a Slave, read the Frederick Douglass narratives, read Harriet Jacobs, you know so much. But when it comes down to putting that information in practice, what would you do? Okay, who's next?
I'm Tina.
Hey, Tina.
How you guys doing? So, I don't know. I think I might be an older person here. So, I read this first time I read this was in the early 80s.
Okay.
So, it's interesting what you guys are talking about the viewpoint of Dana and Kevin and all the rest of that. And I just like to give a little bit different perspective. When I read it back when I first read this book, I was captivated about the arrogance of Dana because she saw herself as an educated person and that she knew she had more she had more book learning. She was educated. So she felt that she could make it past, like she could survive. Like she could survive what's happening. She felt like she was using like psychology or something to kind of deal with Rufus. And she knew a little bit. And you guys have to remember back in the 70s or 60s, the knowledge we have about enslavement, the slavery or whatever else, it did not exist. So us coming in 2025, reading this from this perspective is completely different than the first time I read it in 1980 because I too didn't have as much knowledge or enough understanding. So the lens I look at this, I think one of the with that remake with Hulu, one of the things I didn't like it was because they had it in present time. I don't think you get the same story from somebody from 2020s, the 2000s, as somebody from 1980. I mean, we in 1980, from a political standpoint of where we were, the civil rights movement was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
It was real. So there was it's just a different take. So I find that Dana's the mistakes that she made or whatever else was this kind of, I've overcome this already. We've already done this, so I should be smarter than.
Yeah.
That's how I took it.
Yeah.
And then, I won't get to the second half of the book because then I read something else. Because I've read this book about 4 or 5 times, but still, I just find that was like one of my observation about it. It's like Octavia Butler does such an enormous job of that time in 1976. Even the fact that she was married to a white man, that was, oh my God, you're married to a white man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just, yeah.
I love that you brought up Dana's arrogance and the recentered the time, right, that Butler was writing in, because Black studies, we learn about Black studies today, but it was first introduced on college campuses, more specifically in California, in 1968, right? And so it was not this part of any curriculum until 1968, right? Civil rights movement. And then a lot of Black writers or people were becoming conscious, not in the way that we see conscious people today, but they were becoming more conscious about Black movements. They were organizing, and a lot of these organizations and organizing happened on college campuses, right? And so I think Butler was tapping into the pulse of the time, right? We have all of these Black women standing up as activists in some way, and we can see Dana in an activist lens slightly, but Butler was tapping into the pulse of Black women on the West Coast during this time, more specifically educated Black women. And I also want to remind people that Butler was writing during the most prolific time of Black women writers, and this is the 1980s Renaissance. And I know Kindred comes out in 1979, but she has so many books that are before that and even published in the 1980s. And so she's also engaging with other Black women writers who are writing about this type of stuff and thinking about Black women's agencies and things of that nature. And so I think in a sense, she is critiquing education, and she is critiquing the elitism that comes with educated folks. Okay. And also showing them that your education will fail you. It will.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead.
That became very clear. I agree with that 1,000%. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Who next?
Okay. Hopefully my audio is better.
You better.
Okay. Great. So I feel like you brought up a lot of like things I even just didn't know just within the conversation you just had. But I think it definitely reframes things. I didn't know that Black studies wasn't happening until 1968.
Yeah.
So like that even reframes it, because I feel like just growing up, I've always known about learning about Black history. So it still is relatively like a very new field.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think of how in current spaces today, I'm college educated, and you go into the workforce, and it's a new landscape for you, but you're also learning how to navigate kind of that space as well. And education in the same way can fail you in that same regard, in that same respect. So it just kind of made me see like the parallel in that, because you have to often, as a Black person, know how to navigate these very white spaces when you are the only one. And that's not always in the book. That's not, always. That's something you just gotta kind of learn as you go.
Yeah.
And sometimes people you meet along the way will help you to navigate, that space, and then you become more accustomed to it. So I just thought that was an interesting, definitely like parallel there.
All right. Thank you for sharing. All right. Who's next? What you got? Alexa. Mhm.
He must be a good person because of the information that she already had. Once realizing the family lineage, oh well, he was married to my Black ancestor, so he has to be a good person. And she keeps trying to pull that out of him despite everything he does. I've not finished the book,
Yeah.
but I'm past the map portion.
Yeah, I think that even, when we're thinking about the family Bible, right? There was a name, Alice plus Rufus, in the family Bible, but this is how history gets erased, because she says in the book, no one mentioned he was a white man, right? And so of course now you're coming face to face with this redhead white ancestor of yours who now you have to save, right?
Right.
To ensure that okay, let me not get there. But you have to save him. And now, but history has been erased because only thing you have is this Bible. Now, enslaved culture, generally the enslaved, the only way that they would keep record of the family tree was to keep it in the Bible. That is generally the only text that they could hold. And some people still have the family Bibles and some people do not. But that is the only way that they were able to track the genealogy of their families once they made it on American soil after the Middle Passage. And so I understand your frustration. She wants him to be a good man. She wants him, but she's also, I think there's a line in the book that says she's trying to gamble against history, right?
Right. Yes.
Revisionist history. That's what I think about, right? And when we're thinking about our ancestors, even now we assume, or maybe not assume, but we somehow think that they may have been good people, but not knowing that somewhere we have another ancestor who we don't know anything about, who may have sexually assaulted, can I say that? I don't even know if I can say it online, but who may have forced themselves on our great grandma, right? And produced quadroons, octoroons, eventually people who could pass if they kept progressing the race, which is what Dana's aunt wanted her to do. She wanted light-skinned babies, right? When we're thinking about prejudice, someone brought up Kevin's sister and things of that nature. So she wanted the Black side not the Black side. Dana's parents, stand-in parents, the aunt wanted her to continue to progress the race. So that's why she was okay, right? So that also speaks to colorism.
Absolutely. And I myself am biracial, and my father is my white parent, and having to reconcile my beloved father, my beloved grandfather against the things that I know to be true about their outlook is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
I love these men, but you know, when you grow up and then you have a better worldview, more of a worldview, you can kind of see through. And I walked around into my 30s like, yeah, they're white, but like not one of those.
Right.
And then I get in there, and sure enough, Granddaddy Crossthwaite is passing on little Negro boys to his daughter's husband.
Wow.
Like, and it's just like, oh man, oh okay. Well, I'm not immune. They're not immune.
No one's safe.
No one's safe.
Thank you. Who else? Does anyone else want to share their organic thoughts before we hop into the discussion board questions that are on the Substack, y'all, if y'all want to follow along with the questions?
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, I'm Valerie.
Hey, Valerie.
Oh boy, I had so much frustration. I tried to read the book years ago and I couldn't get past River because I was having a hard time trying to figure out someone would go back to the past and how they would actually deal with slavery. You know, again, Dana and her arrogance because of her intelligence conflicts with how Rufus will actually grow up throughout his life, right? So every time she goes back, he's older. And that time frame, how has he been influenced? What has he experienced from his parents, from living on this plantation, in terms of his, you know, interactions with the slaves that are there? And so it seems, from what I gather as I'm reading, as she comes back, she's trying to reconcile to make him better, but that in order to continue the lineage of the family, so to speak. And I feel like her not understanding, not being able to go back there and really see slavery for what it actually is. And no, like one part in the book where they look at the children were kind of mimicking the slave auction, and then she and Kevin were having this conversation back and forth about why would they do that, you know, and then not being able to understand that from what they see and what they experience, they're playing off of it, and she's not seeing that it's right. And just one of the ending lines was like, I never realized how people, I think, could be trained to accept slavery. And that hit me like I had to close the book. I could not, I had to close the book because that was a line that I said, wow, I don't think that she quite gathered what people were experiencing back then. You know, like she was questioning, you know, like some people say, well, if I were a slave, I would do X. You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know the circumstances that you would have been in, you know? And I traced my lineage, you know, to like early 1800s, but you don't know what kind of actual conditions they were living in, right? So, whew, I did a lot of exhaling as I was reading this book.
Yeah, and you know, I'm so glad you brought that up because in our Western mind, in our free world, right? And I'm using free world deliberately. In our free world, we think that, oh yeah, I would have been, someone said in the chat last night, I would have been on my Harriet, like my Harriet Tubman. You don't know if you would have, huh?
Right. Right. Yes.
You don't know if you would have been on your Harriet Tubman. You don't know until you're in that position. And I think that's why Butler wrote the book in the way that she did, because she wants you to consider, what would I do in this moment? Would I play along to get along? Am I thinking about self-preservation? Do I just want to make it to another day? Right? Or should I create this radical Black woman who's on her Harriet? There wasn't that many Harriets, right? But there were a lot of Sarahs. There were a lot of Alices, right? So I think that it's easy, right, for us to say what I would have done, but I also want to ask us today, what are we doing right now? Right? Are we taking up the calls? Because we're in our time and we have certain responsibilities too. And so I don't think we should pass judgment, y'all. I know Dana makes us mad sometimes, but if someone snatched you back right now, you looking at me right now, and now you in 1815 Maryland, which was arguably a little bit less harsh than being sold into the deep South. And by the deep South, I mean south of the Mason-Dixon line, which is Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. Maryland slaves, which is where Frederick Douglass was enslaved, had it a little bit easier than being sold to the deep South. If you were sold to the deep South, you were DOA, basically, because the labor was way harsher than being sold on the being a slave or enslaved person on the East Coast. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, y'all. Anyone else want to hop in?
No, it's just Tachi again. I also want to point out the fact that she's speaking still from a place of privilege because she has a way out, right? She can be scared and then pop back up to another place. These people didn't have a way out. So her being frustrated, or us, I don't know, her looking down at them, I guess, in a sense, about, why they're not rebellious and all these other things that, we were saying about her mentioning the slave auction. Well, you can leave. You don't know how to control it, but you can still leave. They can't. And so that was frustrating me about her too. Yeah, I just know if I had a whip on my back, I'd do whatever you say. Because it hurts. Like, it's just like, I don't think we understand the pain. I don't
And
think
the
we
whip is not a
understand
belt.
yeah, it's not. Like, and I don't think we understand. So I don't know. I don't pass judgment.
I feel like even with her, the way she described it in this book, the harsh realities of the experience that enslaved people went through, like I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go through this course. Because I feel like she wrote it in such a way, it's like, I know I've seen movies, I've seen shows that have explained the experience, but the way that it just came to life, like, it really made me, I feel like, appreciate the sacrifices that our ancestors had to go through, because this was not an easy read. And I'm reading from the comforts of my home.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. I had a thought just now, and even following the whipping that she had, she left, she comes back, and even still, she is still of this mindset of, I am not like them. Even after having experienced something like that, she still comes back to it like, well, I'm not them. She even says so. I still get to walk around and do whatever I want. I decide what my jobs are. I am still not one of them. She can't accept her reality the way she is trying to protect Alice in a weird way from accepting the new reality. That sort of disconnect. And I saw where someone was like, oh, well, I don't think she was that arrogant. There is always going to be a certain level of arrogance in a situation where, in this scenario, someone is allowed to move back into time. There's going to be arrogance because I know more, because I'm from a more modern time, and I know what germs are, and these people think there are ghosts in their blood. So, there is going to be a level of arrogance when you have this much of an education.
Yeah. I saw someone in the chat, and I called a comment in the chat, and someone said, how would her experiences might have been different if she was in Mississippi and Alabama? And I want to kind of paint the picture for you. Slavery within itself was a horrible institution, right? The transatlantic slave trade was horrible. But when we think about the Deep South, they had burning rituals where they burned Black folks alive in states such as Mississippi and Alabama. If they caught you running, once they lynched you, they had lynching parties, which was where they would suspend you up, and they would let people who came to the lynching parties, their lynching ads that were put in papers, they'll spin you up, and then they'll let people who came to the lynching parties take pieces of your body home as souvenir. So while slavery was horrible, period, the Deep South had a grotesque fascination with dismembering and dismantling the Black body during enslavement. They had a very grotesque fascination, right, with trying to piece apart or take apart what makes you Black, right? And when we get to the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, when people are thinking about this, such as James Baldwin, and they're thinking about why did they do this? Why were white people fascinated with the Black body and the ways in which they were in the Deep South? Then we get other answers. So I just wanted to kind of briefly paint that picture about, yes, slavery was slavery, but in the Deep South, there were a harsher group of people, a harsher just experience, which is why you would hear when we did read up to this point, when he says, I don't want her sold south, when he's referring to Alice, or when he says, Isaac, they'll probably sell him south. The South, the southern part of the southern states is not where you wanted to be a slave. They drove their slaves hard, right? And so I just wanted to drop in that. All right, y'all, let's get to the discussion questions because we could just talk all day. All day. Let me see. Am I able to add somebody else? Because we got people in the waiting room. Let me see. Did I reach my max? Okay. If anybody's feeling gracious enough and wants to drop down and give someone else opportunity, let me know. But let's get into the questions. Again, y'all, follow along. The questions are on the Substack. And I'll be dropping the other questions tonight for part 2. All right, so we're going to talk about loss. The discussion question says, Butler opens the narrative with Dana losing her left arm, a shocking and visceral image. How does this opening frame the reader's expectations for the story? What might the loss of her limb symbolize in terms of identity, agency, and her relationship with history? If you read to the end, do not say nothing. But let's talk about loss. Why do we think Dana lost her arm? Someone in the chat says we needed the visceral statement at the very beginning in order for it to connect. Yes, but I feel like there's a deeper reason. Any panelists want to answer?
I can try.
Okay, let's go.
I'll chip in. My name's Talea.
Hey, Talea.
Hello. I think that it speaks. Well, I did read to the end, but I won't. I'll pretend I didn't and go from that angle. We know from the very beginning that a part of her physically is being taken away, and obviously that also represents a part of her something. She has lost something from the very beginning, and so that it speaks to her agency, that she no longer can rely on both of her limbs anymore. So I think that it draws the reader in immediately because we're like, what the heck? What happened? But also we're like, there's something very serious happening.
Okay. We can go with that. Let anybody else want to answer? Someone says, Kelsey says, I think she loses herself progressively, piece by piece, every time she goes. I like that. Okay, Kelsey in the chat. Paula says, I'm sorry, y'all. The loss could be symbolic. For instance, independence, psychological training. We'll go with that. It was her left arm. Don't think she said either way, which was dominant. Okay. Any panelists want to answer? Thinking about loss. Why did Dana have to lose her arm?
I think that Dana, I think at the very beginning of this, it is the wholeness. I think it's more or less like, again, like the wholeness of who she thought she was, understanding who she is, and going through that experience symbolizes there's going to be a piece of you that's going to be disconnected going forward.
I like
You're
that.
not going to always, what you thought was, whole, and you're at this point in your life or whatever, that it wasn't that. And it's also a constant physical reminder of the truth
Okay.
that she experienced, and what she had to do.
Okay. Okay. So I think one thing that the angle that I take is she had to lose her arm because I think Butler was trying to show us that everyone loses something as being a part of a product of enslavement, right? And so even though we are I hate it here. Can you put your phone on mute? No, you okay. Even though we are in modern times, descendants of the enslaved have still lost something, and you will always be at a loss, right? Because you cannot maybe trace your lineage. So just because you're in the present day does not mean you're going to lose something. One thing that I always also caution students to kind of consider is she loses her arm, but these are the same arms she keeps saving Rufus with. Right. And so as we read and go to the next section, I want us to consider how she keeps saving him, why she keeps saving him, and what does it cost her. Any of the panelists want to jump in right there?
Hi, I'm Summer.
Hey, Summer.
I think it starts with her loss of arm. One, as a way to like prepare us for what we're about to read, because this story is brutal. So she just starts it off right away as like, if you can't take this, you might want to back out now. But also, I see it as more of a symbol, as how, as you were kind of saying, as Black people, it's kind of like the way that, there's been a big discussion about how Black people carry this PTSD, almost like we're born with this chronic PTSD from all of the years of trauma. And we know now genetically that there's this thing called epigenetics. And so I think she was kind of hinting at that, but she probably didn't have the language at that time, is how, even though she lost this arm, and I agree with you, a piece of her will always be there. It's like for every Black person, a piece of us is always there. It's kind of like how when we watch movies about slavery and we see that trauma, it hurts us deeply in a part of ourselves that we can't even touch, only that can touch.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how I know people. I've known people who have lost limbs, and that's kind of how they always feel about losing a limb. It's always kind of there. They will still feel it hurt and everything years and decades after they've lost it. Yeah. And I think that's what she was kind of leaning to, is like, even though we have no connection to it, especially in this modern time, we have less connection to it because those ancestors that may have been slave have passed, but it's still with us, and it's with every single Black person, and it will be with every single Black person to the end of time.
Yeah, the pain you're referring to, everyone's putting in the chat, is that phantom limb, that phantom pain. And I think one thing that I did want to say is that during this time, you can, if you want to look at another text where about a Black woman, is Phyllis Alicia Perry's Stigmata. And a lot of, even when we're thinking about a lot of Black women's writers, including Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, they have this through line in some of their narratives where the ancestor will never let the present day person live without remembering. Right. So it's this idea of rememory, if you read Toni Morrison's work, but the ancestor will always want to ensure that you remember what we went through. Right. Remember. And so perhaps Butler is writing in the same vein, where she is ensuring that Dana will never forget the enslaved stories of her ancestor and what Alice will go through with Rufus and all of the things that come in part 2 of this book, right? And so it's kind of like letting the past have its say again, but then again, there's a problem there, because it's like this haunting, like how much remembering is enough, or how much is sufficient, so that we won't kind of not be able to live our lives in the present day, because we're so wrapped up in remembering and also living with the effects of slavery. Just something to think about. Y'all don't even have to answer that. There's just something to think about. Anybody else want to comment before we move on? Okay, let's go on to writing. And I feel like we kind of hit writing in this already, but I just want to read it. It said the question 2, it says, in an interview, Butler mentioned her goal of making readers feel the experience of slavery through Kindred. How effectively does the novel achieve this? Can you identify specific moments or scenes where you were immersed in the narrative? So ultimately, I'm asking, did Butler achieve her goal in making you feel like you were in slavery?
She did it. She goal accomplished. I literally was like in tears. I was like, I need to call my mom. I was like, I've got to get my thoughts, my feelings out because I feel literally so emotionally like charged and also drained and also like literally like I've been taking on this ride and I was talking to my husband. It was like, it was hard because it was like, I know that this is a story, right? But this is real.
Yeah.
This is real. Like, yes, Dana's life and experiences, a fiction. It's fiction, but like this happened. I know there is a we haven't talked about Sarah, but there is a Sarah. There are many Sarahs. Like you had touched on earlier, like I've, gone and traced my ancestry, and there are points on my father's side where I can go back to 1800s, but on my mom, like I literally can maybe go to back 2 generations.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, again, those reminders, and it's like remembering, and it's like there's literally nothing I can do. Yeah. Like literally nothing. So I feel like she definitely accomplished her goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like my background made it a little bit more vivid for me because I know what it smells like. And that it makes it, that's why I made, that lighthearted moment earlier between like, if you with me like that, like I do whatever I know what that, like it's, I could feel it. And I have, made incisions in flesh, and I've seen trauma patients and things like that, but it's not the same, but you know what that smells like.
Yeah.
And it was very, very vivid for me. And so, yeah, I felt like I was there, and I feel like I don't know. It's a different experience when you actually know what it looks like and what it smells like, that level of, and even when they were talking about, when they got the dogs on them and the tearing of flesh. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, and this is something that I remember from last night's chat, when people were telling me how they felt, a lot of people wanted to disengage, right? But you can't disengage from the experience. You cannot. And so, but the fact that you may have wanted to disengage, you wanted to stop, that speaks to a privilege that you have as a reader. Right? Because people who were living during that time had no option to disengage, had no option to run and hide, had no option not to show up, be present, and do what is expected of them. And so if it's a mental toll, taking a mental toll on us reading it today, it makes you sit and consider and imagine what life was like as an enslaved person then. That is why I also kind of have a problem with Frederick Douglass's narrative in the life of a slave girl, because he's very elitist, very problematic to me. I mean, narrative in the life of Frederick Douglass. I mixed 2 slave narratives up, but he's very elitist, very problematic in my case, right? Because he's educated, in the way that in which he looks down on the uneducated slaves, and the way he writes about them in the narrative, or talks about some of their traditions and rituals and things of that nature. He's elitist. And he was not necessarily a field hand, right? And so we also have to think about the differences between a house hand and a field hand, light skin versus dark skin, house ninja versus field ninja, right? So I think Butler, for me, she achieved the goal over and over again. And this read is probably my maybe 9th, 10th read, because I read it every time I teach it. And I was just like, Lord, please let me get to the end of this book. My first read, I was like, oh my God, I'm invested, right? I read it in one night. Now I'm like, please, I need to finish. How many more pages do we have, right? Anybody else want to comment? Okay. Let's go to memory. What time is it? Oh, we got about 30 minutes left, 40 minutes left. All right, memory. Consider the concept of memory as a portal in the text. Memory as a portal. How does Butler use memory to transcend temporal or spatial boundaries? How does this function enhance our understanding of Dana's journey and the novel's exploration of history?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, perfect. It says bad network. I, ironically enough, am back home in Mississippi for the week, so bad service out here. I immediately thought about, I finished the book too, but just up to 143.
Mm-hmm.
When she first went back she made it back, it was very disconcerting. And I think what Butler achieved throughout the entire book is the disconcerting feeling of not just navigating time and space, but navigating your reality as, again, a privileged Black person in current time, and what slavery meant for those who were not as privileged. And so when I think of memory, I think of the fact that memory is plastic. So what I do for work, we talk about behavioral change a lot, but memory is plastic. And so each time you go back, you do lose a bit of yourself, your true self, because it's being imbued with the environment that's foreign. And the brain does a really good job of maintaining itself by getting rid of a lot of what it considers unimportant information. And the unimportant information for Dana when she went back in time was 1976. Like, she's having to forget what electricity is and like all that. So she's having to bring on new information and her brain has to process it. So from a spatial standpoint, it's like there's a bifurcation or a splitting of the mind of like, I am myself and I'm having to be someone else, acting, as she says. And how am I navigating this this new world, this new play, and what I can take on from a mental standpoint, and the toll it takes on my mental. Yes, it's physically tiring being a slave, but consider like the cognitive dissonance that goes into having to pretend to be a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it's going to stop being pretending. You're going to become mentally a slave.
Yeah.
Your memory of freedom evades. Again, like I said at the beginning, memory is plastic. Neuroplasticity says, or the way our brains work, it changes over time. You can change the truth as long as you beat it into someone's head repetitively. If you keep telling a child they're dumb, they're going to believe they're dumb, and they're going to act like they're dumb.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell a Black person you are not free, you are a slave, they're going to begin to act like it. So I think about that. And then I also know that she's having to also collide with two realities, because she's dealing with Rufus, her not her husband, but her person that she's having to see from an ancestral standpoint, and then her husband. And I know the person who spoke about, like, I read this in the 80s, we were just frequently just outside of civil rights. I consider, like, as a Black woman, how are you remembering what it's like? Because she grew up in the time of civil rights or like desegregation.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows her husband was growing up in the same time as her. And now she knows her ancestor is also the reason that it took so long for us to get free. And all of that coming down on a brain as she's navigating this world is disconcerting. Like, Butler does such a good job at imbuing this sense of like just, I don't know, unmitigated frustration and concern, and the amount of work that it takes on the brain to process what Dana is processing and maintain some level of sanity. That's a testament, you know. And how would I handle that? Back to the question of like, could my brain handle it? I think I would go crazy, because that's what essentially it is you're going to have, something's going to mentally break for you. Is you are going to lose your mind. And if you lose your mind, what then? Because, you know, she's always going to get pulled back if she fears for her life. So then what? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that I love that you brought that up, right? Because the narrative that is in your mind is the narrative that you're going to follow. That is going to be your true north in a sense. And when Dana is remembering, she's not just remembering, she's having to become, as you mentioned, right? She has to become this thing in order to survive. And I do think Butler is kind of forcing our brains to adapt, which is why a lot of readers in the chat last night were like, I don't want to engage with this stuff, right? It is dulling, it is long, I'm tired, it's exhausting. Your brain is being forced to accept a truth that your body does not accept in the same way, or your body, doesn't accept. In the same way that Dana's brain has to accept what her 1970 something body has not accepted yet, right? And so I think that when we're thinking about memory as a portal, one thing I want everyone to remember, that every time you remember an event, you time travel back to that moment. You relive that moment. Every time you remember, right? Though your body may be right here, right now, your mind goes back to that moment. Any traumatic experience that you may have had, the moment you remember it, you relive it. And then your body catches up to it, right? And then the trauma cycle begins and continues on and things of that nature. Yeah, memory recall. And I think that there are a lot of scholars. There's a scholar, Vanderkolk, I think his last name is Bessel Vanderkolk. I think he has a book called The Body Keeps the Score. So it doesn't matter if you're not in a place of immediate danger, your body remembers. Just like Dana's body, we saw her get whipped in this narrative. Her body's going to remember that for the rest of her life, right? Anybody else want to come on in and say anything? I'm trying to navigate this and look at the chat. Okay, was somebody going? Okay, let's move on to time travel. I think this is where I complicate this idea of memory for my students every time, and I think it's worth considering. While Kindred presents Dana's journey as traveling back into the past, imagine if her travels were into the future instead. How would this change the narrative's impact, especially if Dana were depicted as a slave moving forward in time? What might this alternate framing reveal about societal progress or continuity? And let me tell you why I think that this could be a possibility. Several times in the book, Dana refers to Rufus's house as home. And we know that home is a complicated place for Black folks, or to notions of home, right? Home and homelessness. But Dana, when she sees the Wayland plantation, she says, home at last. When Rufus is having a conversation with her, he says, don't worry, you're home, right? And so what if Dana is not being snatched back to the past? What if she is projecting herself into a future time, trying to imagine her life there, because she spends more time in the past in this narrative than she does in 1976? What y'all think about that?
I think that if she were a slave moving from the 18 teens into her current day, the late 70s, it would be a total perspective shift. It would be a total attitude change. It should be the opposite. She would not be arrogant at all. I feel like she would be afraid of what her role in society would look like, and also have a really hard time accepting the reality that she could move through the world as a free woman, because she wouldn't know how to do that if she were being brought forward.
She would not know how to do that, but then we are not considering how imaginative slaves are in our imaginations.
I mean, when I say she wouldn't know how to do that, I mean, like, you know how you'd react if you got to go on your dream vacation. You have a pretty good idea of how you do during that. But when you get there, it's a different culture. It's a different language. It's different utensils, food, all these things. And so then you're like, oh, I thought I knew what this was like, but the details of it. And I'm talking about walking around and knowing that she can look a white person in the eye and have a conversation, looking them directly in the eyes. And also tell them to go jump off a bridge if she wanted to. And so I think that would kind of take the arrogance out of her in that way.
So I just want to challenge that, right? Just a little bit, because we do know that some slaves did resist, right? And there were these slave rebellions. And those you may have been conditioned as a slave. What if Dana was imagining freedom in that way, right? And so here is the only reason why I bring this up is because she keeps, and it could be Freudian slips. We could say that if you wanted to, but I think it's worth considering. Why does she keep saying this place is home?
Right.
Why is the Wayland plantation home? And of course, yeah, that could be Butler pulling the strings and she knows all of the things that happens right now. But could it be that she is trying to escape the hells of slavery by telling stories? And we know that enslaved people did do that. I'm not saying it's true. I just think it's fascinating to think about.
I agree. I definitely need to consider that some more.
Yeah, I've never considered that it could possibly be from that perspective. But I do think she would be empowered. I think she would be emboldened. I think she would. Up until this point, I don't recall any experiences of joy from those enslaved on the plantation, right? We don't get any of that. But we get that when she's in 1986, even if it's just like, with her husband and kind of telling that story. So I think we would then have more experiences of her, like letting her hair down. I really do. Like, I think we would get more happiness from her, more than just like survival. I think we do see like that survival, where she's like working this menial job just to get by, but like that she still has this passion to be like a writer. So like there's this hope and joy for her, like moving forward. So I think that's just like something to consider. I think even in today's time, when people, if we think about the political landscape that we're in right now, right? People would say that those on the right, when our now president was elected, they were empowered, emboldened. I think, they may have felt that they were held back. Right? That's the narrative that we often hear. Well, if we kind of think of it in this context of the book, people who were actually enslaved and having much more freedom to do things now, you would feel empowered and emboldened. I don't think you would. I think your empowerment may get you in a little bit more like sticky situations than being afraid of master walking in. It might look a little bit different. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what I have to say.
I wonder if we're conflating empowerment with progress, or progress with empowerment, right?
Yeah.
Because the two are not, the same. And so the only reason why I think that this could be a breadcrumbing situation is because she doesn't spend a lot of time in 1976. It's very imaginary. It's very superficial. It's very on the surface. Majority of the text happens in this past. And so I do think people, if we have, if the enslaved maintained their history and their culture with tales, like oral tales, right? And they created these characters to teach certain things. I feel like if Dana is in this past and this is her lived reality, why couldn't she project herself into the future? And the reason why I also ask this question is because we're living a very real science fiction life right now, right? Think about the inventions or how the Jetsons envisioned FaceTime. Maybe they didn't envision it, but they introduce it, right, in this way that we just use it right now. Or some of the advancements with technology. And when we get to Mind in My Mind, written in the late 1970s, we'll see Butler dealing with this brain BCI type of situation, brain to computer interfacing, which is what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink. And so if people could imagine inventions that we're using now, why can't Dana project herself into the future?
It's home. Rufus said it. She said it. It's home.
She said it. And in part two, we'll begin to see her refer to the Wayland plantation as home even more. She's saying home, home, home.
I feel like the reason why some of our brains are rejecting this is because we're not giving them much. Like we aren't, and I think that's I'm gonna speak for myself. That's probably my fault to think that their minds are so preoccupied and busy with surviving that they can't think of a future like this. And not to say that they have inferior brains, but to say they're already preoccupied with so much and they have to do so much. They don't get they get very little respite in that time. And so to think that you created an entire world where you envisioned yourself wearing pants and, married to a white man instead of being a bedwench to one, and then all that other stuff, like how can you perceive that when you have so much else to do? And that's probably our problem. But I don't, and while you're talking and, positing this thesis, I'm just like, well, yeah, they very well can do that. But it's just my limited perspective to say like, wow, how can you? And that's probably why we're all, or most of us are like having a hard time grasping that concept.
I appreciate that, right? Because it is kind of like a brain F, right? Like, absolutely not, we can't do this. It doesn't make sense. But you said Dana imagining herself married to a white man instead of being a bad wench. And I love that part because we do know, and they're not prevalent narratives that are told, but some of the Black women loved their slave masters on the plantation. There are narratives about that and firsthand accounts of the women loving their masters, right? And when we get to part two, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler, you will hear Sarah refer to her slave master as her man. Okay, that's not a Freudian.
I did get to that point. Yes, she did. I got to that point.
Okay, yeah. So even that saying, my man, she is elevating herself from that, bed wench status to being an equal or even a lover with this man who owns her. Right? So it's not that far-fetched, y'all. It's not.
Her calling him my man sort of gives them equal ownership over each other.
I would actually, sorry, not to challenge, but I have a thought experiment that I'd love to really play out. When we talk about my man, we also need to consider the dynamics, the power play that exists in a healthy, consensual relationship between two adults.
Sure.
And I thought about what you mentioned, and I remembered, I thought about how Sarah, for example, and eventually that person, and Dana, they are engaging with men who don't really see them as equal. Because when she mentions how she met, when we finally learned that the man is white, that Kevin is white, and she talks about how Kevin got mad because she did not write or type for him. And that to me signified, it foreshadowed what we would see with her and Rufus, in that she's engaging with a man who is her partner, quote unquote, but he doesn't see her as equal because he's frustrated that she will not do a thing that he asks. And in so doing, it's like, well, I expected you to do this, so why did you not do this? And, oh, we're getting married. And it did not feel very like what you would expect the trajectory of I like you, you like me, etc. relationship to play out. And I wonder if we are talking about imagination and all that jazz, if the same could not be said to be true for the women who wrote lovingly about their masters, because again, at the end of the day, they were slaves. They could not marry the man. And when Rufus learns and people learn about it, they're like, what are you talking about? They could not fathom. So if the white man, Rufus, cannot fathom, and the other slaves cannot fathom Dana being with this person, then how can we say, honestly, truly, that these women were on level with the men in their lives? Because they couldn't be. They mentally, they thought they were, but again, we exist in the environment that we live in. Or like that one TikToker said, like, whose imagination are we living in? And at that time, they really were living in slave owners' imaginations.
Sure.
So they were within the confines of said imagination. So as much as they want to stretch themselves in the parameters they're in, they still cannot. So my man with some caveats and disclaimers.
Sure. So I think that the power is a sexual power, right?
Fair.
And it's not, of course, they were property, and a lot of them did not get freed upon the death of their master. They actually got sold. But the fact that they held some type of sexual power over the master, and the masters loved them, majority of time, they didn't even look at their wives. And I think Dana makes a reference to the fact that there were children on the Whalen plantation that looked more like Tom Whalen than Rufus did. Right? Insinuating that Tom had been with the black women on the plantation. And there's also this line where she says, it isn't a crime to rape a black woman, but it is a crime to love one. Right? But we do know that some of the white slave masters did love their wife. And if y'all watch 12 Years a Slave, and y'all watch the film, and even in the narrative, Patsy and the white slave master, I don't remember his name, but there is this scene where the wife, the mistress of the house, wants Patsy whipped, and he does not want to whip her because he loves her and he cares about her. But that is a crime. You cannot be a black sympathizer, and you cannot love your slave. You can sleep with them, you can reduce them all you want, but you cannot love these women. And so, to your point, no, they were not on equal footing with the master, but they did have a sexual power over their master where they could sway some things, right? And so for Sarah when we read that point, to refer to this man as her man and not her master, it's this kind of what I refer to as possessive intimacy. And we get into those questions in part 2. All right. Anybody else?
I just want to jump in real quickly because when I read this, I was like, I love this question because it just promoted more creativity. And I was thinking about if this past version of Dana would still fall in love with Kevin back in the future, and how her thoughts about being open into an interracial marriage or even a relationship, or even just finding other white men attractive, or even other races, because there's more migrants of Chicano, Mexican Americans, and these other races that are now more predominantly in the 70s, and her approach to finding other races either attractive or getting into relationships with them. I thought that was interesting, and how she would choose to survive during this time, because she had a hard time finding a job, and it wasn't the best job, and I wonder what types of job she would be open to and her form of survival, and her if she would try to find her relatives, her aunts, her cousin that she mentioned, her favorite cousin, if she would find a way to find them again.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing those points up, thinking about Dana's relationship with Kevin and the race factor, right? And it reminds me, because I don't think California has changed much. I have great black female successful friends in California. They are in tech. And I was on the phone with one of my friends yesterday, and she's dating a white man. Nothing wrong with that. Do what you do. But she said, Brianna, if I only dated black men, I would have only had 2 dates in the 7 years I've lived out here, because black men do not want us. Now, I bring that up because we don't know who wanted Dana or who was accessible to Dana at that time. We only know that she was introduced to Kevin. She was struggling, a struggling writer. They were both at a temp agency, right? And so I don't know if of course, my friend says, I have to be open, right? In ways that if I was living in the South, I would not have to be open to dating other ethnicities. Okay. And so, point taken. And so, just about you bringing that up, it made me think of how much hasn't really changed in California, and what that may mean if black men may have, approached Dana. I don't know. I don't want to complicate the question, but it's just something that made me think, it brought it to my mind. Hold on. You got to go where you're embraced and loved. All right. Dana seems like, someone says, Dana seems like she is settling for Kevin. I don't feel the love at all. What y'all think, panelists? Y'all think Dana's settling for Kevin?
Absolutely. I'm just kidding.
I didn't see any love. It's just like they had common interests, so let's get married. Like, what?
Oh Lord. Okay.
I'm gonna say that I don't think she was attracted to him, but I think she felt seen by him, and that was good enough. And that's it. And that's really it.
Okay. Somebody said in the chat, Dana tolerates that man. They act like roommates. We're right.
Yes, I agree. I just feel like their relationship really wasn't. It didn't go deep enough for me for them to all of a sudden be married.
Yeah, it was like he literally walked in and was like, "Hey, want to get married?" And she was like, "I mean, I guess since we spend time together, why not?" Like,
It's very much meet me at the altar in your white dress. We're not getting no younger because he's already old. You know what I mean?
yeah, like
comparatively,
I'm very. I'm like,
not
girl,
a geriatric marriage.
She really could have done better. Like, their whole relationship and their dynamic really frustrates me throughout the whole first part of this book, because it's just like you are really going hard for trying to like keep him safe and make sure he's okay, and he's always around, and I'm just like, he will be okay regardless, because he's a white man. His existence alone will keep him safe
In either world.
in
right?
either world. Exactly. So it like really pissed me off. I'm like, baby, you don't need to worry about him. If anything, you just need to worry about you. Like, you need to be selfish in this moment. I know that's your quote unquote husband, but I don't think you marry for love. But that also gets into the whole thing of maybe everybody doesn't get married for love, and sometimes it's a marriage of convenience, a marriage of, upward mobility. Because also, just to like touch on an earlier point, I know they talked about Dana being arrogant, but I think like part of her arrogance also came from like her proximity to whiteness. With her literal proximity to whiteness, as long as like she felt a safeness, as long as she was in proximity to Kevin, who was a white man, which again just goes back to the fact that he's okay. Like, he will be okay. He will survive.
And another thing, sorry. Also, thinking about this, because this man really pissed me off this entire thing, and Dana duckhead self. Because first off, I think they got married. It's giving Jagged Edge for sure. It's giving. He saw her. He said, "Oh, she looked like she could cook or do something or be useful. Type real fast. Let me holler at you." And for the conversation around the family, like to the other person's point about like, well, my mom and dad, or my mom wants me, she's cool me marrying you because you could give her light grandchildren. And then your siblings or whomever is like, ooh, I actually don't like colored people. They're not allowed. And that was it. Like, I feel like love should be work in a good way. And like let's push each other forward. For him to be like, well, I guess I'm never speaking to my sister again if I'm with you. And she's like, well, I guess that's it. I don't like that. Like, I want you to go swing at your sister politely behind me. You know what I mean? Like, you just took it. Like, you just say, well, my family's my family. Tough blanks at the cat. It's giving a marriage of convenience. It's giving, do they even like each other, or did they just get married so that they could get them benefits? Because the 70s had more benefits than we do now for married couples. So, not a fan.
I would like to add a different point of view. Because for some of us, separating from your family, I mean, they were already a little estranged, so that helped him out. But separating from your family and not speaking to them and choosing like who you want to be with is kind of a big deal. Especially if you like were close knit, and it seemed like Dana was really close knit for her family and things like that. And he still wanted a relationship with her sister. I think the book diminished, or maybe she intentionally did that, diminished the way that they broke away from their families. It was just like, it's just us. But for some people, that's hard in real life. You can't that's not an easy decision to make. But I don't want to pose myself as a Kevin sympathizer. I do not like this man.
Period.
But I do not like this man, but I just wanted to add a different perspective. I also wanted to say and pose to everybody, well, do you think how she's going into this relationship with Kevin kind of mirrors
Exactly how
how,
she's going in with Rufus. And that's the
yes,
MFing problem right
and
there.
how,
She needs therapy.
slave women have been going into, certain relationships. There's like, okay, I'm going to sleep with the master, maybe, work my way up and get what I want. Do we think this is the same framework, the same brain that's working in the past and in the present, like right now with her and Kevin? That's what I want to pose to the class.
Correct.
I
10
think
Y'all
points
gonna
for
her,
tell Kevin
Houselander.
every which way but loose.
I,
Y'all
I,
gonna tell Kevin
I
every which
don't
way
like
but
that
loose.
man. I don't like that man. I don't.
I think
Alexis,
that,
you were saying something.
yeah, I think that her marriage to Kevin, and listen, here I sit in my home with the white man who lives in my home. So it is whatever. However, I am self-aware enough
Yeah.
to be able to, and it's not the 70s anymore. I'll say that. But when it comes to that relationship, it prepared her to accept her role in the 1800s. Her marriage to that white man who was also existing extremely right after Jim Crow and everything settled down. He's 32 at this point. When he was a kid, Black people weren't allowed to go to school with him.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that, oh, well, you are Black and therefore under me. And because she was in that relationship, it made it a lot easier, I feel, for her to just be like, oh, well, this is my new white man now, I guess.
That's good. That's good because we haven't got to this doubling effect in part 2 yet, between her and Alice. And so I think that, to your point, Alexa, there's a point when Kevin first comes back where Dana willfully says, it's best to demote me from your wife to your property, basically. Right? Like, let me be your property. I am willing to be your property and demote myself from being your equal. Granted, it is out of survival, or that's how it's couched, but you can't get away from that and how that relationship may have taught her to. But I also think she's kind of resisting that role with Rufus in a sense, right? She's not trying. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, she's so tender with Rufus. She's so tender with Rufus.
She needs him to stay alive.
I guess I'm not a big fan of Rufus, so he might not have made it.
She needs him. She needs him. He cannot die. Because if he dies, she is not born. So she has a mission. She has to.
But she also needs Alice, and she does not go to bat for Alice the way she does for Rufus. Like, she was like, run off with your slave husband. That's definitely a good idea.
We didn't get there yet.
Yeah,
she's say, because I'm sorry, go ahead. Because I was about to vent about how she feels. Because this is a hate account. Actually, this is a hate account. There's something to be said about a need. You don't have to do anything but stay Black and die, first off. Second off, to be needed, I think there is, speaking of dynamics, there is a power in being needed. That codependency thing, that is quite frequent in those unhealthy relationships. And she develops an unhealthy relationship with Rufus just up to page 143, because I give you the first pass as a child. He's drowning. Okay, cool. You don't know where you are. Second and third time, sister, let's have a chat. You need to go to therapy. Something about your relationship with Kevin is affecting your relationship with Rufus, and to the point about proximity. And you are literally changing your, not chemical makeup, but the way you think about the world, because you constantly forgive him. You forget that this man can do terrible things to you. Up until page 143, he could say something that would get you killed. And if time is circular, like we believe it is, and not linear, all of this is it's essentially repeating, right? So like 1976 had to happen for 1815, and it goes in a circle. And I think the lesson for her should be, one would think, why do I feel this such a strong desire to be, I know we're going to touch on the savior piece, but the protector of this man, knowing that he would never give me what I give him. The reciprocity isn't there, babes. It's not even in the home. Are the fathers in the home? You know what I mean? And secondly, with the understanding that I, as Dana, am doing it for this person who would never extend it for me, what am I missing internally that I'm searching for it and willing to sacrifice my cup, pouring out of my cup for someone who can't? Like, what do I need to find within myself? Because it's not just, oh, I need this to survive. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just that. I can't, this is a hate account. I refuse to accept that she does all of this just so she can continue the lineage of her parents and her parents' parents, just so she gets to herself, because she was living a poo life anyway. And all of us agree in 2025 could have just missed out. That's it. That's my question. Is like, what are we really doing this for?
Yeah, I think that people, and that what you're articulating is a common struggle that readers have. If Dana's already alive, then why does she need to save Rufus? Like, how has time shifted? If she's already living, why does she have to save him? But I think where we get to up until this point, she's still trying to figure it out. She knows that Alice and Rufus are her ancestors, right? But she doesn't know how it comes about. So I think, can we have a little grace for her, because she's still trying to learn and understand how they get to this point.
Maybe.
Because she does need Rufus to survive. She needs Rufus to survive to have Hagar. And at this point, Rufus ain't got no kids. So if he doesn't have any kids and he's dead, that means that any hope of her existing in 1976 is over.
But who
I'm
says
not
that
negating
she
that he
needs
does
to
hear
save?
them. What you say?
I'm sorry. No, I'm
No,
saying
what you say?
that. No, like, so I like, that's my central point. Like, yes, she needs Rufus to survive, but Rufus survived without her intervention before. That's how she got here. So why
Yeah.
isn't that a thought in her mind though, that I don't have to save this kid. He's good. Let me mind my business and figure out, how I get here.
Well,
Because
she's
that would be my
actually,
train of thought.
I think that's Butler's control, though, right? Because when she
Maybe.
snatched back, she then learned, okay, he's calling me back. Every time he's near death, I have no choice but to come back and save him. So there is some type of call that he's issuing that she cannot resist, right? So he is controlling this time travel. I think that's just how Butler wrote the story. Go ahead.
Sorry. Speaking of controlling, because this is something I knew I wanted to mention, and I hope someone can carry this. I'm going to have the baton in my hand. When we talk about controlling, like, how it doesn't matter how we end up with Rufus controlling Dana, but what does this say? Again, if we are in the imagination of whose imagination we are in, why is it that this Black woman is having to split herself, to lose herself, to suffer at the hands of this white man? I know it's in the book because of her lineage, but how frustrating does it feel as a Black woman to know that even when you are minding your Black blank business, the world, the universe, whomsoever conspires, that's like, oh, actually, we need you to save this white man. So sorry, you're doing things, you're living your life, come back. And you keep getting pulled back, even if you try and break free. And it's like, I just want to rest. I just want to sit and mind my business. And yet I've got to save someone again. And that really frustrates me, on top of them men just frustrating me.
I get
I
it.
think it has to do with power.
Yeah.
I think it's it. I said I think it has to deal with power. That Rufus, this white man with power, and his power, his survival was calling her back to save him, and he had that controlling power. I think Butler puts that in the book, and not so much as she didn't have a choice in being pulled back, but once she did, I think she was trying to figure out, like, why is this going on? And then she figures out that her role is to save him in order to save herself. That's just, but it's a power play in both
Yeah.
with Rufus and with Kevin.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
I
I know
agree.
I haven't finished the book yet, but my frustration also came with I know Rufus has like an important part with this, but so does Alice and like her matriarch of passing down. Like at the end of the day, she's birthing the lineage. So my frustration came with Dana has this other responsibility of also protecting Alice because she too is important. But in the beginning, she met her twice and didn't really give her much thought to it. And when I'm reading this, I'm like, she's important too. And we might get there in the end of the book, but in the beginning, I was like, let's also try to save Alice because she's as important as Rufus.
We're gonna get there in part 2. I'm so eager to hear what people think about Dana and Alice in part 2. Y'all, we ran out of time. We have run out of time. I guess y'all see now that if you want to be up on the panel, you're gonna have to come to class early. Put your request in. Because we are live late. Some people are saying no. Yeah, it's 7:30. It's 7:30, y'all. We can continue it on in the chat on Substack. But I'm not gonna hold y'all till 8 o'clock tonight. I'm not gonna do that. This ain't a grad course. This is honors. But anyway, you all listen, okay? I can't take no more. But
Thank you,
y'all,
everyone,
look,
for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for leading this.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
even make it to my notes.
Thank you.
I loved everyone's
What y'all say?
perspective.
I said I didn't even
Yeah,
make it to the notes that I wrote down for the second half of the discussion questions. All this was just off my head, not even what I had written down.
Hello?
which is great, right? Which is how my classes function. I don't want us to come polished. I want you all to be your organic selves because I'm going to be my organic self from the South Side of Chicago, and we're going to just talk about the books and give our organic responses. And so we're back next Wednesday with Kindred Part 2. If you want to be a panelist, make sure you come to class early because apparently I can only add 6 people at a time. I don't know why, but there we go. And yeah, anybody got any questions? If you're not subscribed to the Substack, do so. The link is in my bio. I am dropping the discussion questions part 2 once we get off of here. And then the discussion board for next week. But I think that's it. Anybody got any closing thoughts? Y'all want to do the Kevin?
I just want to say it's a Kevin hater. No, I'm kidding. No, this was really great. I did toes down on it.
Baby,
I see that
you the
man,
president, I'm the vice
suing
president.
Kevin has me side-eyeing the white man in my house.
you. Period, sister.
Y'all don't do Kevin
Yes, yes.
Period.
I am looking at this
We
man
need some
crazy.
sympathy for Kevin.
Absolutely. Black-salutely not. Black-salutely not.
Y'all not right. Hopefully Kevin garners your sympathy in part 2. Hopefully. If not, I totally get it. No one gives Kevin sympathy. Hopefully Rufus gets a little sympathy. Maybe not. Okay.
Take care.
I'm gonna end this live, y'all. Whenever TikTok allows me to download it between tonight and tomorrow, I will be uploading this discussion on the YouTube page. The link is in my bio if you want to review it, if you want to share it with other people, if you want to take notes. It will be on the Octavia Butler Mixtape page on YouTube. Link in the bio. I think that's it. I don't have anything else. We're finishing the book. Be prepared to finish the book. And then the next book, if you look on the syllabus, is Wild Seed. We're jumping into the Patternist series. And so if you want to get a head start, you've already finished Kindred, feel free to start reading Wild Seed. But this was great. I'll see y'all next week and stay safe. Bye, y'all. Thanks,
thank
panelists.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.